recording now. All right, Jillian?
Yeah, so what are infographics? I think we've heard a lot about infographics lately, but I think there's always some questions about what exactly they are. So infographics are just visually appealing flyers that tell a story. So, and they tell a story in a way that's more accessible to everyone by using, instead of a lot of text, and a lot of words, they're instead using these visual aids to tell a story. And when I think of infographics, I always think of USA Today. I don't know if anyone else does, but they're like so well known for these USA Today snapshots where they have this long infographic that tells a story about some kind of issue that they're trying to tell their readers about. And so I think it's really, we all struggle with, who wants to read our research papers? Who wants to read our journal articles? And when we're talking about students, they're struggling with who wants to read this research paper. And so infographics are just really visually appealing, easy to read, easy to grasp the concepts, flyers, essentially.
Mm-hmm. How many of you have seen infographics before? Answer in the chat, or you can do like a thumbs up for your reaction. How many of you have seen them before? Yes. Erin started using them in her class, I know. Yes, yes. Cool. Awesome. Taylor, Rachel, do you have a question? Oh, I think you're raising your hand to say yeah. Oh, awesome. Cool. So people are familiar, so that's great. So now we're going to just chat a little bit about why infographics. So for those of you who are familiar, why do you think this would be a good option for students for projects? What do you think? It's creative. Mm-hmm. It's an alternative to writing a paper. It's fun. Focuses on ideas rather than the writing process.
I actually love that because you're focusing on like the importance as opposed to, APA formatting.
Mm-hmm. More fun than a paper, gets to the key aspects. You develop new skills, absolutely. You're learning a whole new program with Canva and learning how to display and disseminate your information in a way that's accessible to others. For sure. A good skill for them to have. Yep. Awesome. Grabs interest, punctuates your main points. Good. Awesome. So that was a really great start. It offers a different assessment tool. Yeah. So that's really why I wanted to adopt infographics. I'm a first-generation college student myself. I came from UNLV, was where I completed my doctoral program, and it's ranked as one of the most diverse universities in the nation. So something that UNLV emphasized through professional development and, things that Jillian and I both went to learn more about how we could be accessible and inclusive to non-traditional students were alternatives to traditional research projects. And infographics were one of those options that a fellow faculty member in a different department brought as an example. And the rationale for why it's inclusive is it's not measuring those traditional things that we are measuring in assessment through research papers, like how well someone can write, how well somebody can cite APA, certain things that may disadvantage minoritized students. And so this is an inclusive alternative to give them a different format to display all the things that we are assessing through papers and exams, like do they know the content? Can they seek out and find information? And can they talk about it in a way that is evidence-based? So infographics accomplish all those things in a potentially more inclusive format. Jillian, anything else?
No, I think, you hit on everything, and everyone in the chat box hit on the fact that it's still focused on the same skills that you need in order to conduct research. You still need to find articles, you still need, or publications or whatnot, or evidence, right? You still need to do all that. You still need to go through the research process, but it's the way that you disseminate the information is far more inclusive and far more accessible than writing a 20-page research paper. Not to mention, from a grading perspective, they are far more fun to grade.
Yes.
And far less frustrating to grade. Because sometimes, you know, you're grading papers, you get caught up in the stuff that your paper's not really supposed to be like focused on, but you get caught up in the grammar, you get caught up in the writing style, you get caught up in all that other stuff. And when you're, you know, from a grading perspective, infographics are really fun and enjoyable, I think, all the way around. They're also super engaging and creative. And in a second, we're going to talk about a survey that we gave to students in both of our classes for about a year or so. And we asked them different things about what did you like, what did you not like, you know, what would you suggest? And something that consistently came up is that they loved that they could be creative with an assignment, and that made them enjoy the assignment even more. And we'll talk more about some, or give you some quotes that they said, and it was just an overall good experience for everyone. So, Bree, if you want to talk about the demographic area. So, yeah.
I mean, this is it. So this is our sample from both universities, right? So the majority were not white. Most were Hispanic or Latinx, followed by Black, Asian, and they could choose like different races. So there was a large proportion who were also multiracial. The majority were first generation college students. So we have a high first gen population both at UNLV and Wichita State, and the majority were women. So this is one big takeaway. The majority of these students that we surveyed indicated that the infographic assignment was more engaging than papers or exams, which was really cool finding and validating for like all the things that we hoped it would be. Students also picked up on that as well. And so we also asked open-ended questions in the survey, which was facilitated through Qualtrics. And we asked, what did you think of the assignment? Like just as a whole, what did you think? So this student said, although it was more difficult to me, I really enjoyed it. It was much more fun compared to writing a paper. It is also a great way to engage others in what I'm learning. No one wants to read my research papers. Showing my infographic to family and friends brings them into my world and educates them as well. So that's one of the cool things about these infographics is that, you know, for my students in face-to-face classes, I print all of them on the last day of class and we have an exhibit. And so they can take that printed infographic with them and they can show anybody, like their family members, their friends. And right, like this student said, you probably wouldn't do that with a 15-page research paper. So I think that's really a great way for them to show others what they're learning too.
So this student said, despite me not being a very creative person, I actually enjoyed the assignment. I think the statistics and overall prevalence of the topic I research are more likely to stick with me after doing the infographic instead of a traditional exam or paper. So again, highlighting the fact that you still had to do the research for it, but by presenting it and disseminating it in this particular way, the information is more likely to stick with our students. And we want them to take away the big picture, right? We don't need them to remember every single nitty-gritty detail of the class because that's impossible. But these big picture things we want them to take away. And if they feel that they can do that better with an assignment like an infographic as opposed to writing a paper where they might get bogged down with some of the other stuff that we'd already talked about that comes with writing a paper, I think it's a win.
So we also asked, what did you enjoy about the assignment? This student said, I like the creativity of an infographic assignment. It allows freedom to create and share knowledge of a topic related to the course. I really enjoyed it. So again, they really like that creativity that they're able to employ through this, which they wouldn't be able to do in, say, an exam or a paper.
Similarly, I enjoyed this assignment. I enjoyed that this assignment allowed me to be creative and to utilize Canva, which is one of the websites that you can create free infographics on. We'll talk about that in a second. I think the skill of using Canva will help me in my future career. One of the things I really stress about infographics to my students is that this is a skill that can take you beyond the classroom. You know, I think we all know that many of our students are not going necessarily want to go into grad school. They don't necessarily want to go into a career in academia, but maybe they want, you know, they want to go into the you know, police or a police department or juvenile justice or victim advocacy or whatever else it might be. And, you know, in a lot of these organizations are, you know, they have to put stuff out on the internet. They have to put stuff out on their websites that can capture people's opinions or capture people's attention really quickly. And so having a skill where you can disseminate important information in a way that people can easily grasp the concept is going to take them well beyond the classroom. And so I think that's something that is, there's utility both in the classroom for all the reasons we've discussed before, but also outside of the classroom.
So in the chat, someone asked about, you know, doing this assignment virtually. And so I will say the first time I implemented infographics was with a summer online corrections class. And so it went way better than I even would have thought, like what they came up with, you know, because there is that component of not being face to face. Like you can't sit down with them and show them hands-on potentially, like you might face to face. You could through Zoom, of course. So I was a little worried the first time I implemented it online, but it worked out really well, and I just had them submit the file through Blackboard. But now I started doing blogging for my students in corrections, and I'll do it in Women in Crime. And so I think I'm gonna have them post a picture of their infographic to their final reflection blog too. So then they can see each other's.
And I'll also add that I had an independent study student who, she was not interested in writing a paper, you know, the traditional paper. So we came up with the idea for her to create a blog, similar to the blogs that, you know, you and I read out there. And within her blog, she did infographics in there as well. And it was really nice. And it was, you know, a way that she felt comfortable writing, that she felt, you know, felt a more dedication and a passion for the project, and a way that she could then turn around and inform other people.
Yeah, so you definitely can implement this online. It has been done. It's been successful so far in my experience. So don't be afraid of that.
Okay. Rachel, I see your question about master's and professional students versus undergraduate students. And I have not implemented infographics with, you know, graduate students yet. And Bree, I don't know that if you have either. However, I think, oh, you have? Okay. Well, I think infographics, as well as things like fact sheets we've done with graduate students. And I think they're really, really useful. At the, you know, after at a master's or even a doctoral level for getting information out about research, either yours or a summary of research to a larger audience.
I think once you see some of our student examples, like you'll see the caliber is up here. Like this isn't just putting pictures together, it's gathering evidence, summarizing it in a way that you would like in a paper, but it's just a more accessible format. So we'll show you some student examples, and one of mine is from 2 graduate students.
Awesome.
Oh, so this student said, oops, I really liked reading through the papers and deciding what I wanted my audience to get from the topic. No fluff is needed to make the 5 to 10 pages in an infographic. I can gather the information that is important and stick to just that. So I hear this a lot, that students feel like they need to add things to reach the minimum requirements. And in infographics, because it is so focused on being concise, like they actually may have more problems making it concise. But instead, they're not just adding the fluff, they're really sticking to what they need to get their points across, which is a plus.
So we also have to ask them what they didn't like. And I first want to say, before we go into the dislikes, I was Happy. I was thrilled. And with the fact that so many of our students actually said they liked an assignment, right? And that they liked this assignment and that they wished they had other opportunities to do infographics. That oftentimes in my class or in Bree's class is the first opportunity or the first time they've even heard of an infographic. And so honestly, to hear a student say like, hey, I liked this assignment, it was fun, that's a win in any educator's, mind. But of course, there are some things that they didn't like. One said I disliked citing sources, but that's always something I've had trouble with, and, I feel you. And somebody else said I disliked that Canva, which again is the website that we use to make the infographics, would make, hold on, my screen is, would make it difficult to make things look the way I wanted them to look. And that's just, there's really a learning curve with Canva, and you have to have patience because you're creating something that is creative. So you got to like move little things around and you make it look pretty. And so sometimes that can be frustrating because you can't just like throw it on a piece of paper and call it an infographic. There's a skill to it. So those were two dislikes, and Bree's going to talk about a couple of others. But I mean, when you compare it to the reasons that they like it, it's a win.
A lot of them said like there honestly wasn't anything I didn't like. So we wanted to be critical of ourselves though and put some that they didn't like. So it was a little difficult to provide information with the little space given. So again, that's something I found students would struggle with because they are so used to writing papers that it would be a struggle for them to try and only focus on what they needed for the infographic. They're not used to it, so it is new to them. And this is my favorite dislike. So honestly, I would say that I disliked that it was not an assignment I could just wing or cram for. So I really like this dislike actually, because the cramming for and, being able to do exams quickly and that sort of thing, that's something that more non-marginalized students are better at. So by taking that off the table, giving them the time that they need to create something really creative is actually more inclusive and accessible. But this student did not like it for that reason.
So we also asked students what they would like to see in an infographic or an infographic assignment. And they came up with a few things. One of the things was to provide enough topics to choose from. And we're going to show you both of our assignments and the directions that we provide them with. And I'll speak for mine really quickly. I do provide my students with I think it was 12 or so topics that they could choose from. They didn't think that was enough. They really wanted to have their own, I think what they wanted was to be able to choose any topic that they wanted. They wanted to come up with a topic. I wanted to rein them in a little bit, but that was one of the critiques and recommendations for moving forward. And I think this just ultimately gets at their wanting to be super creative and have creative freedom with this assignment. They also wanted time to practice. And this gets at something that Bree said earlier about the benefit of having that face-to-face. So you can answer questions. You can, show them. Some people don't do well by watching a tutorial. They literally, or reading something online, they literally need you to sit with them and go over how to create it. So more time that was devoted to practicing how to create an infographic and ask questions about how to create them. This was a big one, but we have a workaround. So because infographics are so reliant on visuals, right? Canva and some of the other websites that you can use to create infographics provide you with some visuals, but Canva also has a different levels of a subscription. So you can have the basic one where you're going to have access to basic images and other things to include in your infographic. As you pay for things, though, there's a lot of things that you can pay for, and Canva will consistently remind you of that, because it has like a little thing that says like pro, and it says like, oh, you got to pay $1 for this, $1 for that, $1 for that. And I told my class, do not pay for anything. I don't want you to have to pay to do this assignment. So a lot of them mentioned that they wanted access to free images that weren't going to violate any kind of copyright issue. And then about a month ago or so, Bree found a solution for that. So she'll talk about that in a minute. And another thing is they wanted the ability to show off their infographics. They put a ton of work into them, and they wanted to show them off. This is exactly what Bree was talking about when she does her finale, where, you know, you get snacks, you bring snacks into the class, you put all the infographics up on the wall, just kind of like an ASC poster presentation minus no free wine, right? And so they wanted the ability to show their hard work with their classmates and talk about it. Or share it with others, but it really makes sense to share it with the class. So those are some of the on the students' wish lists.
So one question we have, do you model the skills for this assignment throughout the semester so they start learning parts, pieces, you know, throughout the semester rather than right at the end? And so I will say, after some trial and error and learning, I do it more in the middle of the class because it is their final project. At first I did kind of save it for the end, and I've learned from that, you know, puts a lot to them at the end and they might get overwhelmed. So yeah, so I think like doing this throughout really helps. And also, like, I started putting like one of the infographics I made as part of one of my interactivity models. Like, they have to go through the infographic and like answer questions. So I think like seeing it and like having activities where they work with them also helps them to understand, you know, what this assignment is and what they'll be expected to do. That's a good question. And then Kathleen put a link to free stock images. Awesome, thank you. Pexels is also a good resource. But for infographics, like, you want more like icons and things like that. So again, we'll talk more about that as this goes on. All right, so I think this is the part where like everybody wants to know, like, how do you do this? And so some of our recommendations, we'll show you our instructions and like how we actually do this. But what we've learned, you know, we've done this. I started this in in summer 2019. So I've learned along the way, like, what to do and maybe, you know, things to improve on. So clear instructions is key. Also, how-to guides and tutorials. Like, I actually make my own video tutorial and walk them through my assignments, and I show them actually like how to make one in different platforms. And then examples are key too, because like when you tell someone to do an infographic, they may have all different ideas of what that means. And so for this specific assignment, giving them your own examples, I would strongly suggest like you go through this process yourself and you make examples for students, because the best way for you to be able to instruct and help them is if you've gone through the process yourself. So that is my expert advice. Okay, so first I'm going to show Jillian's instructions.
So I mentioned earlier that I am not nearly as techie as Bree. So you're going to see my base instructions, and then you're going to see Bree's, and you're going to be totally blown away. But I stuck with Word, right? I don't even know how many pages. It's kind of lengthy document, but I spell everything out for them in a Word document. And one other thing that I learned in the how to do creative assignments at UNLV, that workshop, was really the emphasis on transparency in teaching. So if you tell them like you're going to create an infographic and they've never done an infographic before, they don't even know what an infographic is, the question is going to be, why on earth am I creating an infographic? And even in one of the student comments on our survey, I remember reading, one of the students said, in the beginning, I kept saying like, why don't we just have a paper? And then they realized the importance of an infographic and how fun creating an infographic could be. So I always, with every assignment, but certainly with this assignment that is very unfamiliar to them, I always use the transparency in teaching approaches. So I always tell them what the purpose is, what they're going to get from it, and then what their task is. I'll also mention that anything that if you want to take my assignment directions, I'm happy to share them with anyone, although you're going to see Breeze and you're going to be blown away. But if you want like bare bones, like, if you want bare bones, like Word document PDF, I got you. So yeah, I just, let them know what the purpose of an infographic is. And I stress this obviously in the assignment itself, but when we talk about it, I always want them to know like why I'm assigning something and why I'm making them do something. So, I do provide them, as you're going to see in the next page or so, with a list of possible topics. And for this particular infographic assignment, I've done it a couple of different ways, but for this particular year, I focused it on the topic of violence against women. This is a women in crime class, so half of my class is spent on violence against women, half of my class is spent on system-involved women. And I've done it both ways, but I was playing around with doing it on the front end of the class for this assignment. And so I gave them a number of topics that they could choose from, and they had to choose one of these. And most of these topics were things that we weren't going into too much detail in class. And I did that for a reason. I wanted them to go out and find information on the topic themselves, as opposed to relying on my lecture, and as opposed to, relying on what was in the textbook at the time, right? So while of course we touch on all of these things in the class, I didn't spend weeks talking about any one of these particular topics. And so I had them choose one of these topics, and I told them that they were required to find at least 4 peer-reviewed or law review journal articles to include in their infographic. So I did it kind of like in a scaffolding kind of way. I had 2 parts of my assignment. The first part of the assignment was for them to find the articles, right? And to find the articles and to write like a very brief synopsis of the article, so I know they read it. That is how it's going to be related to their article, to their infographic. The second part of it is the infographic itself. And to guide them a little bit more, again, not to take away creative freedom, but to make sure that they had certain information in their infographic, I told them that they needed certain sections. And Bree, can you scroll down just a little bit on the... Okay, awesome. So I have, 3 sections that they had to include certain information in, or they had, or like in sections 2, they had to pick something that was going to go into those sections. So they did have, some choices. But I really wanted to stress the importance of when you write or when you create an infographic, people want to know like the so what, right? And oftentimes the so what can be easily changed by providing information about the prevalence of an issue or the prevalence of a policy or why this is a big issue and so on. And then I make them pick in sections 2 and 3, at least one of those things to choose one of those topics to include in their infographic. And so their infographic had like at least 3 primary sections to them, but they were all going to look a little bit different, even if you had the same topic as somebody else. You can scroll down a little. So I provided them part 1. I said it was scaffolded. So part 1 was that they had to pick the topic. So at least getting them starting to think about an infographic. They had to in this class, they had to just provide the reference list, like find the articles, download the articles, upload them. In previous classes, I've had them do like a brief summary of the article. I've been kind of playing around with the best way to do this. And then I provide them with a rubric for both part 1 and part 2. During that's the rubric for part 1, and then part 2 is on a separate piece. So this part 1 is kind of low. It's very low stakes. It's not worth a whole lot of points, but it at least gets them started with thinking about peer-reviewed articles, or review articles. It gets them thinking about their topic. And during the class, I've set up time for them to meet with to go to the library and sit in front of a library computer and practice with Canva and hear from our urban affairs, a librarian who can walk them through how to find research and how to find articles and how to read research articles. And then they have practice there. If I were to do this again in person, because obviously we're all online right now, and I am going to do this again in person, it's just when in person might be, I will give them more time to practice in class. So I give them at least one day, but I think I would do more than one day because many students wanted that kind of practice. So my rubric is something that, you know, those classes and those assignments that like every time you do it, you change it up for the next time. And so it's one of those that's still a work in progress, but I assign points to every section that they need to complete, like in a few slides ago. I also grade them on things like, what does your infographic look like? And I know that can be somewhat subjective, right? But the whole point of an infographic is to create a visually appealing flyer, essentially. And so if you have all this information and you just throw it on a document, then you're not really achieving the purpose of an infographic. So I do grade them on design and layout and neatness and, you know, clarity and things along those lines. And you know, some students rise to the occasion. We're going to show you some examples in a second. Some students also struggle with it a little bit, but I think that's an important thing to include on a rubric since it's the whole point of disseminating information. I'm happy to answer any questions or, you know, about the rubric, about how it's worked out. I've had a lot of success with it, despite, you know, changing my rubric around every single time I teach it. But I've had a lot of success with setting the instructions up like this and letting students kind of run with it.
We have a couple questions in the chat. So Millie, I will get to your question. It's a valid question. I'll get to yours when we show examples. And then Andrea says it would be amazing to set up a consultation with a graphic design class. Like maybe there's a way to collaborate with graphic design faculty, which I think would be super cool.
That's really cool.
That's a great idea.
I don't know about all universities, but at UNLV, embedded within the library, there are folks that have that graphic design, like they are focused on infographics, and now I'm blanking on what their title is actually called, but they are able to also, you know, do the graphic design stuff. And again, I'm blanking on what their name is. And so that's in our library. So for those of you who might be in a university that doesn't have a separate, you know, graphic design class or whatnot, seeing that what the library offers in terms of people who are not just, you know, librarians, but can also help with the data visualization, that's what they're called, data visualization specialists.
Wow.
They might be in your library as well.
Nice. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and show you mine. So I started doing something new this semester. I started creating liquid syllabi for my classes. And so this is a liquid syllabus. Instead of a PDF document with my syllabus, this is a website. So this is something I just started doing. So far students seem to like it, so that's good. But this is where I have all their information about the assignment. So just like Jillian, I also use the transparency in teaching model because based upon research, it shows that it improves academic outcomes with minoritized students. So that's why I do it. Thanks, Amy.
She's so awesome with this stuff.
So I found like teaching online, showing them like what it's supposed to look like was like one of my biggest challenges. And I didn't want to have them wait until like my tutorial video to see what I meant. So I made a GIF of me showing my own example, my flyer. So I just recorded a video of myself turning over the flyer to show them that like this is what the end product is supposed to look like. It's supposed to be a brief, concise flyer. And so I give them tools to get started. We'll go over some of the examples in just a second. But this is just like, okay, like where do I even get started with this? And so I give them examples, I give them templates, and then I give them my own tutorial where I walk them through, you know, my assignment, what does this look like? And then I also give them a tutorial for Canva. And so the thing I like about Liquid Syllabi is that I can embed videos like this, and I can include hyperlinks and things that I might not be able to do in a PDF. And so I have a rubric for them. I made this in Canva. So now I use Canva for everything. And in Google Sites, you can do alt text. So I include alt text so they have all this information. So this is for my corrections class. I do it in women crime too, but this is what I have my liquid syllabus for, so that's why I'm showing you this class. So I give them a variety of topics. They can also pick a topic, you know, that's not on the list, but I just ask that they email me, so I make sure that it's an appropriate topic. Sometimes they pick topics that are too narrow, and I'm afraid they won't be able to find enough information, so I kind of guide them and have them consider like broader topics. And so this is my task area. So like what does your infographic need to contain? So it needs to have a title, it needs to have background information. And then the part that I really push is having a solution or a recommendation. Like I'm all about, you know, what do we do from here? Like we know there's a problem, but what do we do about it? What is your prescribed solution for our community or our nation? So that's the end part. I don't give them a word length or anything. I just suggest that their writing style should be professional and they should use third person. So that gets a little bit at Nilly's comment about, you know, how do we teach them writing in this format? I model it through the examples, but also I give them feedback on an initial draft. And so that way I can work through them with the writing style that way too. And so I give grading criteria for each section, and this is my rubric. Like I have a rubric in Blackboard with just these parts, right? Based upon content, this is the grading criteria for this part. Then visual appeal, like Jillian mentioned, is hard to define. So I try to give them a little guidance like cohesive colors and font. Font should be legible. A common thing that I see is they use font that is way too small. So I try to guide them, and you know, if this is printed, we have to be able to read it on a piece of paper. So don't go below 10-point font. Having bold, larger font for headings, just giving them some guidance, right? I'm not like taking over. I'm not like, you know, I want to give them some structure because I know like not everyone's coming from a graphic design background, obviously. So I want to give them just some design tips. So they know what I'm looking for when I'm grading. And then reputable sources. So I don't require them to use only peer-reviewed articles. I open it up a little bit because this is an undergrad class, and a lot of them, like this is often their first class they're taking with me for their semester starting at Wichita State. And so I kind of warm them into it. I let them know that, you know, these are what reliable sources look like. I also give them guidance on peer-reviewed articles, but it's not my only requirement because a lot of these sources also have really great information too. I've also had issues in the past where they would find websites that say pros and cons about an issue, and they are not reputable sources. Like they had some awful recommendations, honestly, where I was like, oh no, this is bad. So I give them an example of what that looks like and not to use those. Like you can go to those as a starting point, but don't only use those. And then I also give them guidance on charts and images. So this is a really great video from Venngage, which is another platform that offers infographics. So I give them a tutorial about that. I give them a link to where they can find free images, but as I mentioned, we have some exciting news about Canva coming up. So stay tuned. And so, yeah, just giving them that structure. Both Jillian and I asked them to do APA format for their references. So they are still practicing some of those skills that we would see in research papers, but again, just in a different format. And then I also let them know, you know, what this should look like and how to submit, because I found that they had some issues like, how do I actually get my file?
Can I just add one thing, Bree?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Canva, but as Bree just mentioned, there is something Venngage, right? I want to caution people, and this just came up on the how to submit part. In Canva, you can save under a free account as a PDF. In Venngage, at least in my experience 2 semesters ago, you cannot. So you actually could not save a PDF in Venngage. And so being mindful of, you know, what your plan is for how you want students to share their infographics, being mindful of how they can ultimately download it and share it is really, really important. I didn't realize the thing with Venngage until like halfway through the semester. So they can share it by sharing a link to you, so you can pull it up. But if you wanted it to like PDF and post like we're going to post today, you can't do that. So just be mindful of the website or software that you ultimately choose.
I also give them the option to do it in PowerPoint because, you know, maybe they are a little scared to dive into this, you know, like it can be, learning a whole new program can be overwhelming. So I also, in my tutorial, I show them how you can easily do this just in PowerPoint, and I give them a template to get them started. But yeah, we both recommend Canva because it's awesome, and we'll show you why it's so awesome. So those are my instructions. Oh, okay. So like we mentioned, a big part of this is showing examples. Like, so what is a good infographic? What is a bad infographic? So I'm going to challenge you to kind of spot the differences between these 2 infographics that I'm about to show you. If I can find, yeah, okay. So we have infographic 1, which I made both of these. So this is infographic 1, COVID-19 and incarcerated people. So this is my infographic. So this is an example that I give to them. I have another example that I give as well. And then this is the second example. So let me know in the chat, what are the differences you see between these 2 infographics, and why might one be better than the other? This one is on prison nurseries. So what are some issues with this one compared to the first one?
Readability. Can't really tell. I know it says prison nurseries, but yeah.
So font choice for sure. No color blocking. Title unclear. It also has a typo in the title. Much less information. Spelling errors. Yep. Anything else? No references. Yeah, so that's what I was looking for. So nothing is cited, right?
I will note that if you look up infographics online, a lot of times there are no references with infographics online, but in terms of an academic assignment, I think it's really important to do infographics with references. But if students just look up reference or infographics and like a Google image search, they're going to see a ton of different kinds of infographics, and not all of them are going to have references for them. But for academic purposes, they definitely would require them.
So that's why we give our own examples. So like they can see what it looks like for the class. So very bare info, no graphics, like no like visual aid for data, right? So none of the thing, like, so I use this as an example when we go over this together as a class of like, okay, so this is an example of maybe like a D infographic. And how is this different from the A infographic? And so we laugh about it, right? Because like, I created this on purpose to be bad. And so they're able to spot like, okay, this is what makes an infographic an infographic. This is what I need to do. And this is potentially what I should not do. So that's a key part of transparent teaching, is giving examples of both a good, like an A paper versus maybe a D paper, or I'm sorry, infographic. So those are our examples. So you spotted a lot of the issues with them, so good job. All right, so here's what we've all been waiting for. So I recently found out that as educators, meaning also, college faculty, instructors, we get access to Canva for Education for free. So I'll show you what that looks like. I was super excited to find this out. So this is my Canva account, right? So this is what it looks like on my end. I'm already signed in, so I can't show you exactly like how to do it, but basically you go to pricing and then education. And afterward, I can send you all the link on how to do that. So if you go there, you register, I think I uploaded like my faculty websites, but you can do like your faculty ID or anything to gain that access to education. So I highly recommend it. So it opens access to a lot of things that you wouldn't have regularly. So like, for example, like I'm working on a flyer for a study right now. I would not have access to that background photo of the cameras without having my educational access. Like I gain a lot more access to images than I would with just the regular account. And so like I mentioned, I made like this check-in in Canva. I make things for my liquid syllabi on here. I also make badges for them. For my other class, they get badges for completing things. I made all of those here. So there's really a lot that you can do with Canva. So I highly recommend it. And the cool thing about this is you can share that access with your students. So I have not yet implemented this. Like this, I just found out about. So I'm planning on sharing a link with them and giving them the template in Canva, and then they have access to Canva for Education too. So all of those images that wouldn't have been accessible for them are now accessible if they go through my account, which is super cool. So highly recommend it. Some of you said that you've used it for presentations. Yep, so there's so much you can do with this. It's awesome. I can't recommend it enough. Like, it's really cool. So yay, access to Canva for education. And now here's the part that we really like to share because it's our student examples. So we like to show this because it shows the amount of effort and the enthusiasm that they had for this assignment. Like, it really shows through. And these are being shared with permission from our students.
So this is one of my students from last semester, and she chose the topic of sexual assault of female service members in the U.S. military. And one thing I should mention about Canva, as well as Venngage, but because I really like Canva, is that they do have templates for anything you want to create in Canva, right? So you can go into Canva and create from scratch what your infographic will look like. But for some, like, you will literally have a blank document and you like put everything in, you move the font, the icons in, you'll move the tables in and all that stuff. You can do that. But for some students, that is really overwhelming to do. So they also have templates on Canva that Bree's going to show you for anything, whether you're doing infographics, whether you're making a wedding invitation, right? They have templates for everything. And so I'll just, well, some of my students will choose to start with a template of an infographic and then make it their own. And this helps ensure or helps increase the likelihood. I'm sorry if you hear a screaming child. He is almost 2 and screaming. So this helps them kind of have a visually appealing infographic from the beginning, and then they make it their own. They can change colors, they can change icons, they can change elements, they can change text. Hopefully they do change text, right? They can change all of these things to make it their own, but they have something to start from. So like, and it's super easy to just change things around, and it's actually kind of fun once you get in it. Bree, if you wouldn't mind going back real quick.
Yep.
Sorry.
No, you're good. There you go.
Yes, the best thing about Zoom is people's kids. Yeah, he's you're gonna hear him because he's getting ready for nap. So anyway, so I'm pretty sure that this particular student did take a template, but then she made it her own. She brought in, you know, if you scroll down a little bit, you can see the background is that of, you know, like a map. So that applies to when we're talking about the US military. You can see when we're talking about military sexual trauma, she found an image on Canva with a brain, right? With homelessness. She found a house. She found with health. She found something related to healthcare. Now, those I know for sure weren't the initial icons that were in this icon. So, that were in this template. So she took this template and made it her own while maintaining the fact that it was clear, it was easy to read, it was visually appealing. So I really, really like this one. And then of course, you know, when you're trying to fit all this information on an infographic, obviously this always happens where your citations at the end are really, really small. I have, what's that?
I think that's okay if they're small.
I don't mind it either. So I have, you know, them really small, or some students, they're really struggling with it. I allow them to submit another document that just has their citations. I do require, as you can probably see here, little superscripts, right? As opposed to writing out like a citation, like an in-text citation, they use superscripts and then just link the superscripts to the citations at the bottom. But I thought this was a really, really well done infographic that was put together that really tells an important story and is easy to get the big picture of sexual assault experienced by female service members. So I really like this one. I had another student kind of go in a different direction where he was focusing on cyber stalking, and he made his infographic out to look like a phone, which I thought was brilliant, right? He used like, yeah, sometimes it's hard because infographics can get like really long. So if you like want to look them on one page, it can be a little bit difficult. But like he used the icons that if you opened your phone, you would see those same icons on your phone. And he's talking about cyber stalking. So it was really, really relevant. And again, his looks very different from hers, but it still provides really helpful and important information to a reader that might not have a lot of information about cyber stalking. So I really like the fact that he made it look like a phone to be in theme.
It's so creative. I love it.
I loved it when I saw it. I was like, this is amazing. So those are 2 examples. I have a ton of examples that students have given me permission to share. So if you need more, but providing these to other students is really helpful. Not for them to copy it, because when I do this in my classes, I put like a giant watermark over it with their names and everything so they can't copy it. But just to give them an example of things that are really good examples.
So in my Women in Crime class, we incorporate service learning. So they actually collected their own data about issues related to campus. And this infographic is about the Wichita Area Sexual Assault Center, which they have a location on campus. And so this was an infographic about that center. So I really overall like, how it looks. It's visually appealing. They give a list of the services that WASAC offers, which I think is really cool and important. They give, the background importance of why WASAC is needed. So they give, a background of statistics about how often sexual assault occurs and, really to gain interest from people who are reading it, why this really matters. And so this graph, they actually made themselves, which I thought was cool. So they made this from data that was given to them from WASAC about what things that they offer, what services are offered. They also talk about confidentiality, what should you expect if you go to this organization and use their services, which I thought was awesome. It's very specific to our university and Kansas. It talks about, our approach here in this city. And then also their recommendation to improve WASAC. So we did a campus survey about campus safety, victimization, and perceptions of, violence and things on campus. And so their awareness of WASAC was very low, right? So most of the students at Wichita State did not know WASAC existed. So they gave recommendations for WASAC to build recognition and awareness about this organization on campus. And so I'll go through one more really briefly because I know that we're running out of time and I also want to see Erin's next teach-in. So I'm super excited for that, and Brittany. So this was another one also using the data we collected from our survey. So Liz created this about campus safety at Wichita State. This was a graph that she made from the data we collected. I like that she used our colors. So our colors are, this golden, yellow, and black. So she stuck to our campus colors. She talked about our study that we did together. So this is what we found. This is what we did. And these were her suggestions for improvement based upon our study findings. So in corrections, like we don't collect our own data. Like this is a 500 level class. So we do things a little different in Women in Crime. But the outcome is still the same where you have this visually appealing infographic. And we got 1 minute left, but just wanted to check in. We've been answering questions along the way, but we are happy to send you our contact information on Twitter. My name is Bree Bopp, so I will send that to you, and also my email. I just wanted to open it up briefly. If you have any comments, feedback, or questions, let us know.
Yeah, and feel free, if you need more student examples or anything, you can feel free to email us. I would put my Twitter handle on there, but I don't even know what my Twitter handle is.
It's G. Pinchevsky, I think.
Okay, there you go. It's G. Pinchevsky. This is awesome that I don't even know it. But feel free to reach out with any questions that you guys have. It's fun to do. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's a fun thing to do for both student and professor. So please let us know. Any idea if it's difficult to convert one's regular account? Is it difficult to convert to an educational account?
No, I did it with my existing account and I submitted a request and I just had to follow up with Twitter. Like they didn't do it right away. So I just followed up on Twitter. That's where their like tech support is located and they fixed it right then.
Awesome.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And just let us know if you have any questions. I really love this assignment just because I wanted to be a graphic designer in another life. So it enabled me to like, have that fulfilled with my students, like helping them through the process. And it's much more fun to grade.
So much more fun to grade. Seriously.
Oh, awesome, Christy. Awesome.
Your mental health will thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm going to end it here so we can make it to the next session. But thank you all for coming.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Awesome.